is enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again.
Donald Trump's convention now wrapped up. Where he's headed next, what we're learning about his beefed up security detail as well, and the major worldwide IT outage. How vulnerable are we as issues are even arising for our federal government, including Customs and Border Protection? This is The Hill on NewsNation. And hello, good evening. I'm Blake Berman. This is the every 4-year Friday where we would normally Monday morning quarterback, nitpick, break down what the presidential candidates said in their speech last night. But tonight, that's been pushed off to the sidelines as the call from Democrats for President Biden to quote unquote pass the torch is growing louder. Within the last 24 hours, 11 Democratic House members have called for President Biden to leave the race, making the total at least 30 House Democrats at this hour. And now the number is even growing in the United States Senate, where 3 are now calling for the president to go, including 2 trying to defend their Senate seats. But President Biden, who is still in Delaware this evening, recovering from COVID, released a statement saying he will not bow out. Quote, I look forward to getting back on the campaign trail next week to continue exposing the threat of Donald Trump's Project 2025 agenda, while making the case for my own record and the vision that I have for America, end quote. Now, today, the president's campaign held an all-hands meeting, and the vice president participated in a donor call. Remember where we are, though, at this moment in time. Democratic leadership has not come out to silence the skepticism within their own party, especially up on Capitol Hill. Polls in the battleground states show Donald Trump is winning. And today, the president's man in charge of the swing states released a memo explaining why the campaign believes the skeptics have it wrong. He is Dan Cananan, Battleground States Director for the Biden campaign, and joins us live here on the Hill. Dan, thank you for running to the camera. Appreciate the time, as always, sir. Let's start here.
Hey, Blake.
You spend time around President Biden. Are you absolutely convinced tonight, Dan, that he is 100% running?
Joe Biden is running. He is our nominee. He is our president, and he's going to beat Donald Trump in the fall once again. Full stop.
Okay. All right, full stop, you say. So let's talk about the battleground states here for a second, because that's your job, and it's a big job, right? The main states that will either make or break this election for either President Biden or Donald Trump. Here's the latest polling, Dan. Let's start in the blue wall, because those are viewed as the crucial states for President Biden. Emerson College poll. Donald Trump +3 in Michigan. Donald Trump +5 in Wisconsin. +5 in Pennsylvania. How many of those states, Dan, do you need to win in order to win the election as you and your campaign see it?
Yeah, I mean, Blake, the thing that we think about with this race, which we've said from the beginning, is that there are 7 or so states in this country. You named a few of them, but also North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona and Nevada that have been exceedingly close for Democrats and Republicans the last several cycles, for Senate, for governor, for president, margins within a point or a half a point or a quarter point. There's political gravity in this country. We expect close races in all those states, and the truth is there isn't a blue wall path or a Sun Belt path. There are 7 unique states, any which of one could become the tipping point state and the decisive state in this election cycle. We're playing hard in all of them and expecting to win close races everywhere.
So do you believe that you could lose some or all of that blue wall and still win?
Look, we are competing in all those states firmly. I mean, I feel great about the blue wall states, Blake. I mean, I was just in Michigan with the president, Detroit, last Friday, more than 2,000 people, very enthusiastic, organically chanting, "Let's go, Joe, don't you quit, we've got your back." There's energy on the ground. We just hit 100,000 doors in our program, Battleground States, just last week. What we get back in those conversations against what we expect in the analytics and the modeling is very strong. We think that the electorate is still where it needs to be to deliver a victory for Joe Biden, and we've expected a close race and a tough race. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I said that in the memo today.
Right.
We always have known this to be a tough race and a close race, but our campaign is designed to win a close race, and we're competing in all those places with that purpose.
So I started with the blue wall, and I hear you on, Dan, that you believe this is going to be a close race, but let me take you to the other four, because Nevada +5, again, this is the same Emerson polling, Georgia +6, North Carolina, Arizona +7 for Donald Trump. Are those out of reach right now?
No, and anyone that thinks a poll in July is predictive of an electoral result in November has not looked at 2022 or 2023 or even 2020. The reality is voters are not snapped into this election. We're still in this construct where we're talking about Joe Biden in a referendum environment as opposed to a choice between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. And we know empirically when the voters who will decide this election, swing voters, suburban voters, women, our coalition, when they come out and they see the choice between Donald Trump, who wants to repeal Roe v. Wade across the country, who wants to pardon January 6th insurrectionists, Project 2025, and not to say nothing of his past policies on tax cuts for billionaires and millionaires, against the President Joe Biden from Scranton, focusing on the middle class economy, focusing on building out this country in the right ways, restoring freedoms, putting family first. Those choices work for our voters. They come back to us time and time again. The polling is irrelevant at this point in the campaign. We've expected a close race. It will be close. We'll compete hard, but we feel very good about the choice when voters are confronted with that.
Why do you think you can win an elections race, an issues race, rather, excuse me, Dan? Because when I look at the recent polling, you know the top issues, immigration and the economy, right? Trump +10 over President Biden on the economy, +11 on immigration. The bright spot, of course, is abortion, where for Democrats, where President Biden is up by 10. But I mean, we've talked about this, Dan, quote unquote, it's the economy, stupid. 38% only approve of the president's handling of the economy. 33% only approve of his handling of inflation. So how do you win in issues economy when it seems as if the American public is bearish on what the president's done the last 3.5 years?
The issues and the record of Joe Biden are popular across the board, especially with the voters that win elections. Just look at prescription drug price reform. $35 caps on insulin is so popular, Trump wants to pretend that he did that. He did not do it. Joe Biden did it. Bipartisan infrastructure, massively popular across the board. Trump tried to do it, could not do it. Joe Biden did it. And on immigration, Donald Trump would much rather fan the political flames and keep this issue alive for personal political reasons. He tanked the deal on the Hill for that very reason. I think people understand on the border, when it's a serious issue, the difference between someone who puts a three-legged stool of security, of the economy, and keeping families together, which is a value-driven proposition on the policies for Joe Biden, versus Donald Trump, who wants to play politics. I think on the issues across the board, we can make a persuasive case to voters.
So let me leave you with this, Dan, because as we know, and if you heard the lead-in, it's something like close to 36 members of the House, Democrats, now who have come out and called President Biden to step aside. Again, you run the battleground states for the Biden campaign. I'm looking at Congressman Grijalva in Arizona, Congressman Stanton in Arizona, Congresswoman Schulten in Michigan, Congressman Pocan in Wisconsin. I can give you even a more extensive list, but I'll leave it there. These are Democrats in swing states, Dan, who have said Joe Biden needs to step aside. They are telling their own constituents in those swing states the president needs to, quote unquote, pass the torch. Hasn't the damage already been done if the president indeed stays in the race? Because you can't put the genie back in the bottle now on that, can you?
I wish you could be with me, Blake, in Detroit last Friday, or in Madison on the Friday before, or in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania on the Sunday before, where people were so enthusiastic. And I cannot tell you how disconnected the conversation is in Washington or on Twitter from the reality of what we see on the ground, at the doors, at those rallies. It is the voters that will decide this election. And we're going to take our case to the voters in the states that will win, with a 1,200 staff, the 300 offices, and a candidate with a record that we know is going to resonate with the American people.
Dan Cannonen, Battleground States Director for the Biden campaign. Dan, great to see you and speak with you as always. We thank you for being back here on the Hill. Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Blake.
You got it. All right, joining me today here on the Hill throughout the hour, Chris Stirewalt, NewsNation political editor, host of The Hill Sunday. Kelly Meyer, NewsNation Washington correspondent. Michael Starr Hopkins, Democratic strategist. And Aaron Perini is a Republican strategist. Hello to you all. Nice to have you in. My gosh, we made it to Friday. It has been an historic and a surreal week. Yeah. Here's my list, Chris, of the members of the Democratic Congress, Democratic congressmen and women who have said President Biden needs to drop out. And I wonder what you made of what you just heard there from the Battleground States director.
Well, Dan is a smart person, a good strategist. I respect and admire him, and he will do whatever he can do with what he's got. But what he's got right now ain't a lot. And the reality, and you alluded to this, there's the narrative among Democrats is it was a bad debate performance. That's not really true. The truth is that Joe Biden shouldn't have run for a second term. And Democrats said, well, we're going to say it's okay, and we're going to do it anyway. We're just going to do it anyway. We're going to make it happen. It's going to be all right. The debate happened, and Democrats started to say out loud what they had been saying behind closed doors. The problem isn't the debate performance. It is voters have known. You look at the race hasn't changed. Race hasn't changed. Biden was down 2 before the debate. He's down 2 now. That's the number. He was losing in every one of those swing states before the debate. He's still losing now. The state of the race has not changed. What has changed is that Democrats have now said out loud these things that you can't unsay. Right? Zoe Lofgren, who is a serious, important, grown-up, influential person, a close ally of Nancy Pelosi, a big deal in the House conference, she has said, it's time for you to go. What is she going to say next week? I thought about it.
Never mind.
I thought about it, and actually, you are sharp as a tack.
Right. So in that interview, we know Dan. He used to be a panelist on the show. He used to sit in that very seat where you were sitting, as Chris mentioned.
Things ahead for you.
I don't think I'm getting invited to that part.
And you know him and you like him, but you had your head down the whole time during that interview, and you didn't like what you heard. Why, as a Democrat?
Because at the end of the day, it's almost insulting to voters to make the argument that there is a path forward for President Biden. We like him. We think he had a good first term. But like Chris said, you can't put the genie back into the bottle. We know that he's not physically where he needs to be to serve a second term. And when you look at the poll numbers, you look at Tammy Baldwin, you look at Tester, you look at all these
Wisconsin, Montana senators,
Arizona senators, New Mexico, Nevada. I mean, we're seeing these senators outperform Biden by significant margins. And if you're a Democrat talking about Donald Trump's a threat, that there's a issue with him rolling back abortion, banning contraception, how can you really make the case?
To be a contrary hillbilly, let me just say the other way, which is Joe Biden's chance of winning re-election is about the same that Donald Trump's chance to win the presidency in 2016 was. Low, you got, what do I give him, a 1 in 5 shot, and he's running against Donald Trump, who looks a lot like Hillary Clinton. I've said it here before.
The flip is...
Looks a lot like Hillary Clinton. No matter how bad things get for his opponent, Donald Trump can't get over 50, and that's reason for... I
want to get to you as the Republican perspective for a second, but what are you hearing as it relates to President Biden's future?
I mean, all today we've been reporting on the constant communication from the campaign, putting out a memo today that he was leading, that we just talked to, Dan. And then we also heard from Harris did the donor calls saying that Biden is the top of the ticket, promising that. We also saw and talked with the White House. Basically, they were saying and denying the reports of the Biden family starting to talk with him about exiting the race. They said that is not true. But he definitely has, a decision to make in front of him, as they're saying.
So as Michael had his head in his lap during all that, you were jotting down notes, Aaron. I think if you had pom-poms, you would have been cheering. What did you hear there?
I heard a number of things. One, he's got a hard job right now. It is hard to be a spokesperson that has to go there and try and sell and spin in an instance like this, because when the bad news starts rolling, it is hard to get that back. But he talked about the fact that they've hit 100,000 doors recently, right? But what are they telling voters at the door? Because what he also said is that, well, they like Biden on the economy. They're not listening to voters, if that's what he's saying on camera right now, that they like Biden's policies. They like these things. So what are they telling these voters? Because the polling's showing on the economy and immigration that this isn't working. He mentioned that they were in Madison, and what a great reception that was. Mark Pocan represents Wisconsin, represents Madison, and just came out against the president. Right. There's a disconnect, and the American people won't believe it. And to your point, it discredits them to continue to try to sell the lie.
So as we sit here at 6:15 Eastern on this Friday evening, a reminder, President Biden is off the trail tonight, recovering from COVID, back in Delaware. We do not know when he will travel back here to Washington, and what the future holds. The White House, though, telling us today that President Biden is feeling much better and is recovering. So who's the next man or woman if President Biden drops out of the presidential race? Ooh. Chris will break down how that process could play out.
Better get ready.
And what you should be looking out for in the upcoming days and weeks, still to come here on the Hill. But first, on the other side of the break, Trump set to be back out on the campaign trail for the first time since his assassination attempt, where he's headed, and what we're learning about his beefed up security details. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation.
Play and Alexa.
This is The Making of America from the Jefferson Media Group. In 1815, Napoleon Bonaparte was defeated at Waterloo, ending his reign as the Emperor of France and sending him into exile. When hearing of his brother's defeat, Joseph Bonaparte, the former king of Naples and Spain, decided it may be time for him to seek new challenges in a new world, in a new place, called New Jersey. Arriving in Bordentown, New Jersey in 1817, he built a mansion, and for the next 15 years, Joseph Bonaparte lived an imperial lifestyle of luxury and prestige, all paid for by a treasure chest of jewels he stole while King of Spain. This has been The Making of America. I'm Michael Emerson, and you can visit us at jeffersonmediagroup.com.
Thanks for listening to NewsNation on the Go. I'm Hannah Doba, and this is America's source for engaging and unbiased news.
This Quest for Gold Athlete Spotlight from NewsNation on the Go features U.S. women's indoor volleyball player Lauren Carlini. Lauren's headed to Paris for her first Olympics. She didn't make the cut headed into Tokyo, which she admits was hard, especially when she had to show up the next day to help the team that she missed practice.
It made me stronger, and it says a lot about the other alternates characters as well, that we were just able to put our egos aside and show up for the team.
The Aurora, Illinois native knew she was good, but not making the Tokyo team motivated her to improve.
It was all worth it. It was really hard to go through to battle, but at the end of the day, I can say that I have no regrets in how I went about things and how I kind of decided to approach it.
Now she joins a team that's defending gold, but she knows it's going to be an uphill battle.
We know we have a tough pool, playing China, Serbia, and France. We've seen a lot of other teams get stronger.
I'm Ryan Burrow for NewsNation on the Go. You can hear full athlete interviews and updates on the Summer Games by searching Quest for Gold on most podcast platforms.
It can be anywhere, and it's up to the USDA to be supportive of agriculture anywhere,
including urban areas such as Philadelphia. That is where Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack Thursday discussed USDA urban ag development efforts. Philadelphia is also one of the locations for Urban Farm Service Agency offices.
So that the loan, the conservation, the crop insurance benefits that are available to those who live, work, and raise their family in rural places are also available to those who live, work in urban centers who are farmers.
Efforts through USDA's Office of Urban Agriculture and Innovative Production and other mission areas have included investments in practices and innovations focused on urban and suburban farming.
119 composting awards across 41 states. We've invested in people's gardens to encourage more access and relationship between what can be grown and raised and what can be made available to those who are in need of food assistance.
I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
All right, welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Some breaking news within just the last few moments here as it's Friday afternoon in Washington. Live look at the White House. Sherrod Brown, Democratic senator from Ohio, who is in the fight for his life for re-election in the state of Ohio, has just come out and said that he would like to see President Biden drop out of the presidential race. Another senator now up for re-election, calling on the leader of his party to step aside at the top of the ticket. Meantime, Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance, are holding a rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan tomorrow. It is their first public event after accepting the party's nomination and just a week after barely surviving for Trump an assassination attempt. Now, tomorrow's rally and all other future events will be held indoors as a safety precaution. So what about this rally going forward this weekend, Aaron, in Grand Rapids? Here's what I've sort of noted about this. 160 miles, give or take, west of Detroit, closer to Indiana than it is to Detroit. And I don't think that's coincidental because those are the kinds of areas that J.D. Vance is going to try to win over for Donald Trump.
Absolutely.
Or at least shore up.
Well, also the Trump campaign, President Trump certainly holds Grand Rapids in his heart. It's where he did his last 16 rally. It's where he did his last 20 rally. That for him feels like the place to make a moment for himself on the campaign. And now that you see Sherrod Brown, of Ohio coming out saying that he wants the president to drop out, you're looking at Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio. Like, this is just the dam breaking. And for Donald Trump walking into Michigan tomorrow, he's got to feel pretty good to be walking into Grand Rapids, because that's a place he feels confident in.
I look at Grand Rapids and some of the stats, Chris, second largest city after Detroit. 41% have a bachelor's degree or higher, which the converse, 59% don't. Poverty rate close to 16%. What is Trump trying to do here with J.D. Vance in certain cities all across this country?
Well, I think Aaron is right about Grand Rapids, and it's the Republican capital of Michigan. Grand Rapids.
Yes. There we go.
Out there with the wooden shoe crowd. They are.
Betsy DeVos is from there, right?
Yes, that's the Dutch Reform. It's Jerry Ford country. So that's the traditional Republican part. What J.D. Vance, they're going to do with J.D. Vance is this. Don't go to the suburbs, because he doesn't work in the suburbs. Go to, and I note they're going to rural Virginia or Radford. I think they're going to Radford, Virginia. And so they're going to go to outside places and try to turn up the volume with voters where Trump does very, very well already. Trump won white dudes without college degrees by 35 points, I think it was, in 2020. And they say, well, maybe we can do 40, right? Maybe we can do that, and then maybe we can offset whatever the cost from Vance is with women in the suburbs.
So I started the show by saying this is the every 4-year Friday where we Monday morning quarterback the speech from the candidate last night, right? Of course, there was Donald Trump up on the stage last night, but two other things that happened. Show the video of Melania Trump. Melania Trump appearing for the first time at the rally at the convention last night. They said it was a bit of a surprise appearance. She would walk down the hall, then was there along Donald Trump's side on stage. What do you think we're going to get, Kelly, out of Melania Trump going forward?
I don't know. It's interesting because she put out that statement on Sunday, a pretty lengthy statement after the shooting.
Yeah.
It was very heartfelt. It was talking about all the qualities of her husband and just showing him in a more human way, a personality of former President Trump. So I don't know, but she does really kind of keep off stage a lot. So
she hates politics.
It was interesting. I don't know if she'll, if he does end up winning, if she'll be much of or be more out on the campaign trail. I don't think so. I think this was just a moment for the convention.
Aaron shaking. Aaron doesn't think she'll get there. But so there was.
I don't think she'll be out on the campaign.
No. Okay. So that was one moment. And then there was this.
And they tried to kill the next president of the United States. Enough was enough. And I said, let Trumpomania run wild, brother. Let Trumpomania rule again. Let Trumpomania make America great again.
No explanation needed. You know who he is. You saw the video there. Around the table we go. What did you hear? What did you see there? You don't like it?
I mean,
as a Republican?
I listen, I love the energy. I love that Western New York in me really screams coastal elite. No, I get it. It brought great energy to the crowd, and I understand why he did it, but it's not my favorite part of the convention.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We've jumped the shark. Like, this is kind of what people tune into now.
Yeah.
The WWFification of politics. I created a new word.
What did you see there from Hulk Hogan?
Well, I was wondering, is it like a real shirt or is it like a lighter shirt that he rips off?
Somebody has to like.
He's been doing this for 40 years.
All I know is I can't do that.
This is a breakaway suit. A lot of people don't know that.
Please keep it on.
Exactly. One of the big moments last night. Hulk Hogan there at the RNC.
But the question again. Other than J.D. Vance's wife, what in this event, what in this big night spoke to educated women, spoke to the core group for Republicans? You got a guy who has been accused of battering his wife, introducing Trump. You've got all of this stuff, and it's all very. What was the name of the song that Kid Rock performed?
Ba with the Ba. What did he do?
It was
American Badass. American Badass.
Yeah. So the energy, and I get what Republicans are doing. Democrats have had all the celebrities for all these years and rubbed it in everybody's faces, and Republicans are like, well, we've got our own celebrities too.
So was that hence the Hence the smirk there from you, I guess?
About this
Hulk
being...
Hogan? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we've got a few of our own now. Look at us go. We had Amber Rose, we had Hulk Hogan, we had Dana White.
Amber Rose, Hulk Hogan, Kid Rock. You can have those celebrities.
All right, still much more ahead here on the Hill. The major IT meltdown all over the world, including with Customs and Border Protection. So what is CrowdStrike, and how might it be impacting your everyday life? And we are now several weeks away from the Democratic National Convention, but what if the president isn't on the top of the ticket? What happens if he stays in? Ooh. Steyerwalt breaks it down. Keep it here. We're back in a few.
Ooh.
All right, welcome back here to the Hill on News Nation. So the world woke up this morning to havoc, you could say, a global IT outage. It originated with a faulty software update pushed out by a company known as CrowdStrike. Now, CrowdStrike is a cybersecurity firm that works with numerous Fortune 500 companies to detect and stop cyber threats. This particular update impacted Windows hosts. Now, you could feel the impacts all across the world, the global economy as well. For example, flights were grounded, hospitals forced to cancel non-emergency procedures, and issues even arose at banks. Some media companies reported they were impacted as well. All over the world, businesses scrambling to reboot their computers were faced with what you might know as the blue screen of death. Now, the outage also impacted the federal government, since CrowdStrike is a major vendor. For example, the Social Security Administration closed all offices. NASA, the Federal Trade Commission, and the Departments of Homeland Security, Justice, and Veterans Affairs all impacted, just to name a handful. CrowdStrike CEO taking to X today to assure customers their systems were safe. He said, quote, "Today was not a security or cyber incident. Our customers remain fully protected. We understand the gravity of the situation and are deeply sorry for the inconvenience and disruption," end quote. He also said the problem was identified and that a fix is on the way. Now, President Biden has been updated on the outage and continues to monitor the situation, the White House says, as things start to get back online. And White House cybersecurity official Ann Neuberger weighed in earlier today while speaking at the Aspen Security Forum in Colorado.
Morning started with a 4 a.m. call from the Situation Room to highlight the issue that occurred with CrowdStrike. So where that started was essentially quickly pulling together the U.S. interagency first to assess what's the impact on U.S. government critical services.
Still, the conversation in Washington only beginning. For example, the South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace is already calling for a meeting with CrowdStrike, Microsoft, and government cybersecurity officials. So, what does it all mean? Glenn Gerstle is the former general counsel of the National Security Agency. Glenn, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. Appreciate it, sir, your expertise. I have lots of questions here, but let's start with this. What's the exposure right now for the federal government?
It's hard to say exactly what that level of exposure is, but certainly the federal government is very heavily reliant on Microsoft Windows. Microsoft Windows is the dominant source of operating systems for computers around the world. About 70% of every desktop computer around the world, almost 3 out of every 4, runs on Windows software, and that was what was vulnerable here. How reliant the federal government is on CrowdStrike, whose update caused this problem in Windows operating system, isn't totally clear, but it's very obvious that a significant portion of the federal government does use CrowdStrike to help protect their computer systems.
So, I think of, Glenn, too big to fail, right? We talked about the banks and the financial crisis, the auto industry when that was on the brink, the airlines during COVID. Our lives are lived and run on the cloud, and all these major companies worth tens of billions of dollars that sort of work into the whole system. Is this the new too big to fail?
This certainly highlights just how we've let vulnerabilities creep into the system, and one of those big vulnerabilities is concentration. As I already said, Windows operates 3 out of every 4 desktop computers, and CrowdStrike has about roughly 30,000 customers around the world, and they supply cybersecurity services to roughly 300 out of the Fortune 500. That's global companies. So no wonder when there's a mishap at CrowdStrike, it affects the globe. This may well turn out to be, in terms of the actual impact on personal and commercial lives, the biggest cyber and computer incident ever. Not that it affected that many computers, but in terms of the impact on people's lives.
So if it's the biggest, it could be the biggest ever, the impact on people's lives, and 60% of the Fortune 500 uses it, I got to imagine there's business owners all across the country that say, wait a minute, I get billed for that thing every month. I use it. If that's the case, what do they do next?
So, one of the things that's going to come out of this crisis is a call for more regulation, more liability. We've already heard sounds from members of Congress about it. Ultimately, this is not going to be an individual's problem. This is going to be a system problem. We've built the Internet on a very fragile base, and we're paying the price for years of underinvestment in the reliance and defense side of things, whereas we've spent 20 years making sure we had every possible benefit, everything digitized that we possibly could have, everything computerized, and we're now recognizing the vulnerabilities of that approach.
All right, Glenn Gerstle, formerly with the NSA. Appreciate the time, appreciate the perspective, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
You got it. All right, still to come here from the Hill. The calls from Democrats for President Biden to exit the race only growing louder. Chris Stirewalt breaks down on the other side of the break what comes next. You're watching The Hill.
Tonight, a special Banfield. Micah Miller's body was discovered in a swamp. The police say suicide, but her family's not convinced. Was her pastor husband involved? Now he's breaking his silence and only talking to NewsNation. JP Miller's first television interview. Banfield tonight.
Back here to The Hill on NewsNation. So 1 month from today, Democrats will meet in Chicago to kick off their nominating convention. But the question remains, who will exactly leave the Windy City as the Democratic nominee for president? Despite efforts for the Biden campaign to try to quell concerns among elected Democrats, the calls for the president to step aside continued to grow today. Just within the past hour here, Sherrod Brown, Senator of Ohio, doing just that. So, what might next month look like? Stirewalt is here to break it all down. Chris?
Is it going to be Kid Rock? It may be Kid Rock. Let's see what happens in Chicago. Okay. So, Joe Biden, as we have known for a long time, can wreck this thing if he wants to. You can't take it away from him really under the rules. There's an exception in the rules that says that you can vote your conscience, basically, and there could be a delegate revolt and all that stuff, but that's a weird, wild space. My obsession, and you all know this because I keep talking about it, but I'm going to be proven right, which is the virtual nomination has always struck me as kind of shady. It's kind of weird. They did it, they said, in response to Ohio having a law that Ohio saying that they weren't going to let Joe Biden on the ballot. But then Ohio changed its law, and the Democrats have stuck with it. Why is that significant? Well, the Democratic National Committee had a rules meeting today, and they said, we promise we're not going to do it yet. We're not going to we're not going to nominate Joe Biden in a Zoom just yet because there's all of this upset within the party about Biden being the nominee. But on Sunday, they're going to have another meeting. And in that meeting, it's going to be the credentialing committee. And they're going to decide what would be the mechanisms by which Biden could be nominated in this Zoom call with state party chairpeople. And basically what you're talking about here is the leaders of each state party pull the delegates from their delegation. They probably click a little box, and then they will report out to try to abide by the rules. So here's what happens if Biden stays in. You could look and see here. They pre-convention, so this is Sunday. They come up with the rules. Sometime in the first week of August, they have this Zoom call where Biden gets the nomination. Democratic National Convention 1929. And by September, basically 2nd of September or so, they got to be done. That's what happens. And by the way, if that's what Joe Biden wants to do, it would be almost impossible to prevent him from doing it. Okay. What about this? What if he drops out? What if he says no? Pre-convention, what happens? Delegates are released. They go bye-bye. Whether Biden endorses somebody or doesn't endorse somebody, it doesn't really matter because he has no power over these folks. They're either released or not released. They're pledged or they're unpledged, and that's what it comes down to. How do you get a ticket to the dance? Well, you need a few hundred delegates to get your name into nomination. And Kamala Harris obviously would be almost, I wouldn't say prohibitive favorite, but a very strong favorite on that first ballot about who's going to get the most of those folks. So the scramble would be on. And this is what we were talking about earlier. How do you create a platform, if you're Democrats, in which you can let the delegates see the story, hear about this? And I want to show this last thing, this poll. Here's what the polling says about Kamala Harris versus Trump, Gavin Newsom versus Trump, Gretchen Whitmer versus Trump. And you know what you see there? Not a lot of difference. Not a lot of difference. It's all within the margin of error. They all run about the same because a generic Democrat probably beats Donald Trump. When you get down to it, Joe Biden probably doesn't beat Donald Trump, but a generic Democrat doesn't beat Trump. Unfortunately, Blake Berman, no Democrat is generic. Once you pick them, they stop being generic. And so this is what we'll be watching on the Hill Sunday.
Yep.
That's what we're talking about, because right here in Washington this weekend, it's hot and the Democrats are at each other's throats about how this goes, and people are fighting. Of course, it's probably bad for the country, but I love it because I've devoted my vocational life to this stuff. So nerds unite.
Steyerwalt breaks it down. All right, so let's operate in a space that if he does drop out, you think the strongest next up is who?
It's got to be Kamala Harris.
It's got to be her, you say, but do you think she's the strongest?
We don't know. Honestly, I think running against Trump is such a difficult thing, and with such a short period of time. I think, one, because of the legality of having to not give back the donor money if she's on the ticket.
Right. It's much easier to use.
Yeah. And so I think having her on the ticket, and you alienate an entire base of black voters if you just move her off the ticket.
As a Republican, and you see that list, if it gets there, what's the first thought that jumps into your mind?
If it gets to Joe Biden dropping out, there are a number of Democrats that Republicans should be worried about. You got to be looking at someone like a Josh Shapiro, who
Governor of Pennsylvania.
Governor of Pennsylvania, Wes Moore, whose name isn't getting as much play. Governor of Maryland. Yep.
My former boss.
Because when you look at them, they are unknown, but they're deeply popular in their states. And so their stories will be rich. I mean, I've seen head-to-head polling that would have Shapiro beat Trump. Or, Michelle Obama's probably the biggest fear for Republicans.
I'm I can't live with it.
Poor Michelle.
I'm sorry, you're going to have to.
I already broke it down. But I want to ask Kelly Meyer.
There you go. I was going there, but you take it.
You take it. Yeah, Kelly Meyer question.
Yep.
She's so nervous.
The Democrats that I have talked to, and there's reporting in other outlets that bear this out, that they are inside the White House just bereft. They're exhausted. And every day, right, you can do it for a few days. What's the vibe? Talk to us about what the vibe is like.
Well, it was interesting, too, this week because a lot of people are really gone. So we got to see, Karine walking by, down, going to get lunch. But they are tired. They are dealing with this constant stream of headlines that they continue to go on. We see Andrew Bates going on there. No, this isn't true. Us texting them. They are tired. And for them, they say that this isn't happening, that he's staying in this. They continue to say that, both the campaign and them.
It's Trump vibes, right? It's like the Trump White House.
Welcome to being a Republican.
Yeah, exactly.
It's been this hard for a very long time, whether you're on the Hill or in the White House. Welcome to being a Republican.
That's what I keep hearing. Speaking of a Republican now, in theory, I guess, the world's richest man is in the middle of a long, painful breakup with the Golden State. Elon Musk, at least leaning that way, announcing on Tuesday that he is moving the headquarters of his company, SpaceX and X, from San Francisco to Texas. This is in response to a new California bill preventing schools from informing families if their child identifies as transgender. But this is only the latest escalation in Musk's ongoing feud with California. A new piece in the Wall Street Journal looks at the frayed relationship between how he embraced the Republican Party while rejecting the birthplace of Tesla and SpaceX. He got so fed up with the progressive left, Michael. He started Tesla and grew it. It's like the dream of the progressive left. And they pushed him out of the party.
Did they push him out of the party, or did they not give him the tax breaks that he wants? Elon Musk is making like $85 billion this year, and is complaining about California. This is all a political stunt. He said he was going to.
So then Democrats would say, well, wait a minute, this is why you shouldn't have income tax,
listen,
and that's the California-Texas thing.
Kick the rocks, have fun, go to Texas.
Okay.
Like, this is one where I'm not going to be brokenhearted about Elon Musk leaving California.
Okay. All right. Still to come here on the Hill. More of our coverage on the other side of the break. A massive week in politics. The biggest moments from the Republican National Convention. Leland Vitter joins us as well. Live from the Midwest. You're watching the Hill. All right. Welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation this Friday, late afternoon, early evening here on the East Coast. All week we've covered the latest of the 2024 Republican National Convention. It went on despite last week's assassination attempt of Donald Trump. Around the table we go. Aaron, you were there. You were not a fan of the Hulk Hogan moment.
Not my favorite.
Not your favorite. There was, though, a moment that really stood out to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I lost my brother to an overdose 8 years ago, and so seeing J.D. Vance be able to talk about his mother's struggle with addiction and beating it and wanting to celebrate that, there are families all over the country who know what it's like to lose someone to an addiction. That really resonated with me. And on a lighter note, Baby Dog.
Baby Dog is, explain Baby Dog.
Baby Dog is
West Virginia.
West Virginia's.
You can explain Baby Dog. Who's Baby Dog? Explain it.
Baby Dog is Governor Jim Justice's Lady Bulldog, and
she's a beautiful lady.
She's a very beautiful lady, big and beautiful.
There was the dog up there at the RNC. What's as a Democrat, your main takeaway?
This is a party that can still be beat. Democrats may be far out, but it's not over yet. So we can still pull this together.
Sure.
Yeah, I know, right?
That's the whole. Kelly covering this, and obviously it was an interesting week because you had all the questions about President Biden while the RNC was happening.
Yeah, and I think we were here covering all of the latest. It was just a water hose of information coming out, but I think it did show the unity in the Republican Party, and then while we were covering here, the disarray in the Democratic Party, and then it was also interesting in the early part of former President Trump's speech to see him come out and be a bit more vulnerable, a different side of him saying, I shouldn't be here tonight. And I thought it was interesting to see that side of him.
You got a big Sunday show coming up.
Let me tell you something that's weird about Sunday shows. Who we're going to have on this weekend will depend in part on what Joe Biden does this weekend, what everything does, because we have people that are like, we're coming on, but unless the news is really bad, then we're going to fall through a hole in the earth.
So it's fascinating you say that because that's how things work in this town. There's a lot of people who want to go on television.
And
then there's only people who go on television under certain circumstances. And right now, those circumstances, Chris, are not known.
The circumstances are not known, and nobody wants to be doing a modified limited hangout when you're supposed to be reeling it back in. Nobody wants to be floating trial balloons when you're supposed to be laying low. Everybody's looking for signals, and that's why this is like prisoners tapping on the wall of what are we supposed to be doing here? Send us a message. Let us know. So we'll be here to tell you. Tune in Sunday morning at 10 a.m., and you will know which prisoners are tapping on which ones.
This is still the big question hanging over Washington, and I wonder real quick sort of what you're hearing on that front with President Biden.
It's hard to tell. It's hard to say. Some sources say it could be next week, but then we've also been hearing that week after week. It's going to be this week. It's going to be this week. So it keeps getting moved because Biden keeps digging his heels in. It's going to come to a point where someone maybe around him is going to say, I'm going to take the keys and this is it.
Wouldn't it be amazing if Kelly knew the answer and waited until the last 30 seconds? That would be, she'd be like, actually, I have a text.
Speaking of the last 30 seconds of the show, or 2 minutes and 30 seconds of the show, just think about where we are for a second. It was Saturday evening when all of a sudden we got the news that Donald Trump was shot. It happened on live television. And there were lots of questions at that point in time as to what would come next. And this is a week normally in which tensions get real high, right? It's a convention. In this case, the Republicans' National Convention. Maybe you watched it and said, I hate this. Maybe you watched it and said, you loved it. Maybe you watched it and said, both sides are crazy. So I wanted to end the show with this. A moment elsewhere, outside of politics. Here's what happened in St. Louis, Missouri, earlier this week. That right there is Matthew Tkachuk. He is the star of the Florida Panthers. He decided to take Lord Stanley's Cup to a children's hospital and share it with the children. This, just part of the moment. Matthew Tkachuk in St. Louis.
1, 2, 3. Yeah!
Heroes all across this country helping children, in this case, Matthew Tkachuk. My favorite guy from St. Louis is Leland Vitter. Leland, come on in. Host of On Balance, spent the week in Milwaukee, Wisconsin at the Fiserv Arena, joins us in Chicago. What you got coming up tonight, buddy?
Well, first of all, not only do great things and people come from St. Louis, it proves my point that I often say that hockey players are the most underrated professional athletes when it comes to kind, generous, and gentlemen. And that played out right there. So, boy, and I think you make a great point that at the end of this week we should remember there's some really